Using arm weight when you play the piano can be one of the most helpful things that you can learn to really bring your technique alive and play with more ease and fluency. But this begs a question. What does it feel like to play when you're using arm weight, or how do you know if you're actually using arm weight? So without further ado, let's jump right in. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So what does it really feel like if we're using arm weight when we play the keyboard? Or even more, how do we know if we're really using arm weight? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to learn what it feels like to have our weight settled onto an object. And the best way to do that is to have some sort of flat surface. In this case, I'm just going to use the keyboard lid here. And what you want to do is you want to be able to rest your arm on a flat surface and let it just sit there without any kind of motion or muscular effort, okay? So if I take my arm and I rest it here on the keyboard lid, okay, I'm totally relaxed and I'm just resting the weight of my arm. Now, this isn't quite like it is when we play the piano when we're using arm weight, because this is a little bit too much relaxation. Obviously, my posture here is off, but also my arm is just totally relaxed, okay? So when we use arm weight, we have to make sure that the structure of our hand and fingers is still intact, okay? So it's not quite a totally relaxed thing, but what I want you to focus on is the arm being sort of just resting, okay? So I'm not pushing down, I'm not holding back. A lot of times people play where they just hover over the keyboard, okay, and just stab the fingers down, okay? We want the feeling of resting on something. We want to sort of learn what that feels like, okay? Now, you don't want to feel like your arm is overly heavy. Oftentimes, if you feel like your arm is overly heavy, that means that you're kind of pressing or actually releasing more weight, into whatever you're resting on through your shoulder and torso. You're kind of almost like leaning on it. So that's kind of a way of pushing. So we don't want to feel like that, okay? Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to support the weight of our arm with an outstretched hand or outstretched fingers, like for instance this. So if I'm resting my arm here, and I'm going to do this so I'm in more of a nicer, better sitting position. So I'm resting the weight of my arm on my hand and my wrist. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to do that, but have my kind of outstretched fingers, like so, okay? We don't have to worry about this being a perfect sort of like hand position, okay? So again, I can feel like if my fingers collapse or if they stand up. Now, it's not just my fingers, because I have to be able to stabilize my wrist joint, etc. But we want to feel I can lift and I can go here and kind of back and forth and feel what that feels like, okay? So I don't feel heavy. My arm actually feels quite light, okay? But I can do that, okay? Now, the next thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to stand up on a certain finger. And you'll notice that my other fingers are just kind of lifted slightly, so I can make sure that I'm actually on that finger. Now again, I'm focusing on sitting there, so I'm not pushing, I'm not holding back, but I don't want to feel like I'm overly heavy, okay? Sometimes if we think all of our weight being sort of sitting into that key, like I said, you're sort of almost releasing weight from your torso, or even like pressing in with your arm, okay? So it should feel quite light, just resting, just enough effort to keep the key down. Now, the best thing to start is with the third finger, because it's really strong and it's easy to sort of get that with the third finger. Now you notice again, I'm not collapsing at my wrist. I just have a nice hand shape like so. Then what I can do is I can see if I can do that with each finger. Second finger, which I already did, fourth finger, etc., and even the fifth finger. And I can just feel what that feels like to just sit there. Okay, I'm not pressing, I'm sitting there. I can even do that with multiple fingers. So 2 and 5, 2 and 4, 2 and 1, 1 and 5, any kind of combination I want. And this is all kind of like preparatory exercises before we even go to the keyboard. Because what often happens when we try to start something right on the keyboard, all of the old habits come back. So most of us probably don't practice on a flat surface like so. So you're going to have a tendency to not have all those habits come in, and you're not going to be fighting against those. So I would definitely recommend that. And again, it can be the keyboard lid, it can be a flat table, whatever. Now, one quick note on this, you want to try to be sitting up with good posture as much as realistically possible, okay? So in the beginning when I was sort of like this, that makes that harder to feel what it should feel like or what it's supposed to feel like, because now the weight of my torso is sort of like leaning into my elbow, okay? The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do this on the keyboard. This does not have to be a single day progression. This can be over the course of a week. Okay, so if you don't feel like you're getting it on the flat surface, probably don't want to step to this next stage. But the next thing that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to do the same thing, but just play actual keys. So I can actually do that with my fingers outstretched like so. Okay, and I can say, okay, what does that feel like? Do I feel like I'm pressing or I'm just sitting there? And I want to make sure I'm not collapsing at the wrist, etc. So you can actually feel quite light. Sometimes, again, feeling really heavy, and I can go to the black keys if I want. Feeling really heavy can be an indication that you're pushing or you're putting too much effort in. Then what I can do is I can do a single finger at a time, just like we did. So I can just play a finger like this, okay? And I can go through all of my fingers, same thing, okay? Even the thumb, of course, and I'm just sitting there. So nothing is happening. Okay, now there's a couple really important concepts, that we have to understand. Now the first one is structure, and I've already kind of mentioned that, okay? It's very important to make sure that the structure is there. If the structure is not there, or our posture, alignment, so our torso, our arm coming down, and our actual hand, if that's not there, then you're going to really struggle to fully use arm weight, if you will, to its full potential. Because just like I was mentioning, if I'm sitting like this and everything's really collapsed, yeah, I can kind of feel that weight settling in the keys, but also my fingers are kind of squeezing a lot more than they should be, or they shouldn't really be squeezing, but they are squeezing because my hand is sort of falling off the keys because everything is jelly, okay? So arm weight is separate than relaxation or something else like that, or even just that structure. So we have to have that structure in order for that to work properly. Then the second thing that we want to focus on is that we're resting at the bottom of the key bed. Now this is going to be true no matter what we're playing, whatever notes we're playing, if we're playing octaves, chords, single notes, scales, arpeggios, playing fast, playing slow, etc. When we play a note, we have to be at rest at the bottom of the key. Sometimes people will say different things like, feel like your finger is dead in the bottom of the key, meaning that I have this structure that goes all the way up, to my torso and even my torso itself. But specifically, I have this structure in my finger. So I have a firm fingertip, so the structure's there, but I'm not pressing, and I just sort of feel like I'm resting at the bottom of the key. Just like if we stand, right, you feel like your feet, if you will, are at rest on the ground. Okay, so you're supporting that weight, but you're not pressing and you're not straining to keep yourself up. Again, if your posture and your structure is there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.